Hello everyone. In the previous episode, we had a look at the entire financial freedom journey, including which steps. Today, we will start to go into detail in the first stage, and in my opinion, it is also the most difficult stage. Difficult because people often say that any journey, the most difficult stage is the stage of going from home to the road, which is the step when we overcome the obstacles and start the first steps. In today's episode, I will be with you to dive into the first stage of this journey. And the first stage is the debt stage. It sounds a bit depressing, but it is the starting point of many young people growing up abroad. They usually have a debt on their shoulder when they first go to school. The reason is that in Western countries, their independent culture was formed very early. Therefore, when it comes to college, they usually have to pay for their own tuition. And because in most cases, young people at this age do not have any savings. Therefore, the government in these countries will have a program to pay for college tuition. It's called student loan, and these debts are usually quite large but not few. For example, in the U.S., the average is about tens of thousands. If you study in expensive schools, it may be even higher. In Australia, social security policies are a bit higher, so you are better off. But anyway, it's still a big debt. And these debts will usually follow you for a very long time. That's why for you guys here, the day you pay off your student loan is also a very special day in life. In Vietnam, in most cases, you don't have to get into this debt, mainly due to the culture of our society. Except for particularly difficult cases, usually parents will stipulate for their children to go to college. Therefore, when you step into this world, even if you are white-handed at that time, but at least you are in the zero range. Not to the point where you have to start in the negative range like you are abroad. Those friends usually take a long time to pay off their student loan, if you have to spend a few years to get to your starting point in Vietnam. That is the first milestone in our financial journey. In a moment, I will come back to talk in more detail about this debt. Then we will come to the second milestone. And as I said above, this is the starting milestone of most of you in Vietnam. That is the family bond milestone. Every one of us has a period of bond. This is the period when we have not been able to raise ourselves. At that time we can live thanks to the care of our parents. And in my personal opinion, we will be allowed to live in this period until the age of 18. This is the year when we are officially allowed to go to work. But according to the law, 15 years old is allowed to go to work. Not 18. But I say 18 anyway. In poor countries, we see that there are only 9 to 10-year-old children who have to go to work to help their families. Very poor. I don't mean to tell you to go to work when you are 9 to 10 years old, because I still think that at this stage, if possible, you should try to focus on studying. But what I want to say here is only the fact that we are allowed to live for 18 years. Only that. It is already a great luck compared to others. That's why I think that at the age of 18, you have to stand on your own 2 feet. If you go to college, it's the same as being dragged out for another 4 years. But even if you go to college, I think the best thing is not to cling to it anymore. You can both study and work to take care of yourself. If it's still bad, you have to stop clinging to it a bit. If your needs are 100%, then try to go to work and give yourself 50%. Give yourself 50%. Actually, going to work at this stage, in addition to having money for yourself, it also has another invisible advantage. This advantage is related to the topic of finance that we are talking about today. That is, when you go to work, you start to appreciate money. Let me tell you a story about this. At that time, I had an employee in Australia. Although he was still young, he had a very good personality. Especially, he pursued financial freedom from very early on. These are the cases I mentioned in the previous episode. These are the lucky friends who found financial freedom when they were young. This guy's name is Jaden. When he applied to my company to work, he was only 23 years old at that time, just finished college. When I interviewed him, there were many other people with much better professional skills. But after that, I still decided to choose him because his personality is very good. And the result is that after a few years, now he is a product lead. He manages a team of nearly 20 people at the age of 26, and I really believe that he will go further. Back to the story I was going to tell everyone. It was during a conversation with Jaden. He told me that when he was 15 years old, he went to work for a fast food restaurant, and he received a salary of $15 per hour. In Australia, this salary is very low, but thanks to that extra time, he started to see the value of money. I remember he told me that after going to work, he only needed to drink 3 cups of coffee. It's equivalent to an hour of work. And from then on, he decided not to drink coffee outside. He made his own coffee at home. The point I want to say through this story is that there are things that you don't notice when you eat fast food. But when you go to work, you will find it very difficult to make money. From there, you will start to value money. And thanks to that, you will start to have the first experiences of money. And from there, it will become the basis for your future financial journeys. In these years, you just go to work. It doesn't matter how much salary you get. As long as you go to work, you will definitely accumulate a lot of benefits for yourself. And later, when I look back, I'm sure you will be proud of yourself that you can stand on your own 2 feet as soon as possible. To sum up my personal thoughts, we are allowed to eat until the age of 18. Ideally, you can raise yourself right after that. If not, it's the same as getting 4 more years. But in these 4 years, at least you should go to work to earn some income. Eat a little bit less. Until the age of 22, you definitely have to move on to the next stage. That is the stage where you have to raise yourself. And that is also the 3rd milestone in our financial journey today. Now let's talk a little more about this 3rd stage. When it comes to the 3rd stage, it means that from now on, you can make your own money to raise yourself. And this is a very important stage because it's like a gap between knowing how to swim and not knowing how to swim. For those of you who don't know how to swim, if you didn't have anyone to help you before, you would have drowned. And from now on, after you get through this gap, you can still float. You can still live without any help from outside. To put it in a slightly unfortunate way, that is, if tomorrow your family loses everything, there is no one to help you. You can still exist. And even if you are smart, you can still take care of others. If not, at least you can raise yourself. But at this stage, it also hides some risks. And if you are not careful, it will be easy to push you not only to the 2nd step, but even to the 1st step, which is the debt step. Why did I say that? The reason is usually during the holding period. What do you need to clean your family? It's rare for you to borrow money. Yes, not no, but it's rare. And when you are at the stage where you have made your own money, you have started to get used to spending. And if you don't have a plan to manage your spending, then unfortunately, you miss out on some things that are not good. In addition to the mentality at this time, I have already gone to work. I will be able to pay off my debt. It will make it easier for you to fall into a state of debt. Here I am not talking about good or bad debt. There is another concept of good debt, but I will talk about it in detail in the next steps. And in this particular case, almost 100% is bad debt. If it is already bad debt, it will be very tiring in your life. When you have lost your debt, the ideal is to borrow from friends or relatives. They lend you without interest. Even in these cases, you have to live with the pressure to pay off your debt. In most cases, when you get into this debt situation, you are usually in a state of being able to use all the money you have. Even if it's not enough, it's not enough, so you have to borrow money. And when you borrow money, you take out the rest of the money to pay off your debt. At that time, there is only one option, which is to be angry, promise day by day. But that will make you lose something much more precious, that is dignity. And dignity is a very important thing in life. When we were young, we rarely paid attention to this. But the older you get, you will realize that losing your dignity is one of the great losses. Not to mention that in these cases, you usually owe a lot of debt, not just one place. And then there comes a time when you have to pay off your debt. At this time, you will lose one more thing, that is the loss of your dignity. But losing this, I probably don't need to say how harmful it is. And not to mention that you lose one more thing, but usually at this time, you don't pay any attention to this angle anymore. That is, you lose the people who are really good to you. Usually no one teaches anyone to borrow money like this. People who really care about you, are the ones who lend you money like this. And there are not many people like that in life. And it's a shame that you lose them. That's it. That's what I've been talking about so far, the case of not paying off your debt. Now I'm going to talk about the case of debt paying off. The most beautiful thing in this type of debt is bank debt. Banks are usually very rich because one of the main sources of bank debt is from your own money. In other words, when you borrow money from a bank, you are borrowing money to make the bank rich. These types of debt can be personal loans or car loans. Car loans are probably less in Vietnam. It's a car loan. Or the most popular one is credit card debt. Credit card debt is usually very high. When I did this number, I tested it, and I found that the average credit card debt in Vietnam dropped by about 2 to 4% a month. It sounds like only a few percent a month, so you might think it's not much, but it's actually a very large number. Let me give you some examples to compare. Then you will see how high it is. The first example is when you have money. You send savings with a deadline. Here I will take a fairly high level. That is the 12-month deadline. And if you send a shorter deadline, it will be even less. With this 12-month deadline, the interest you receive is about 5% for 1 year. It means that compared to that credit card debt, the interest you have to pay is about 6 times more than the amount of money you will receive when you send savings with a deadline. And compared to the highest level, which is more than 40%, it is almost 10 times. Another example is if you don't send money to the bank, but you invest in the stock market, where the risk ratio is higher, and because of that, the profit margin is also higher. Now I will not talk about the losing scenario. On average, every year, the return rate is considered good for ETFs. It will drop by about 10–15%. Any fund that returns 15% is already very good. In addition, this is the average return rate in the US and Australian stock markets, and in the Vietnamese stock market, because I don't invest, so I don't know, but I guess ETFs will also drop somewhere in this number. It means that through the above two examples, we see that if we send to the bank, we will get about 5% per year. And investing in the stock market, in the scenario where the market performs well, we will get about 10–15% per year. And the credit card debt that we just talked about is from 30–40% per year. It means that it is many times higher than other investment channels. I hope that at this stage, you guys are starting to be a little scared of debt. Not all. I have only talked about the bank debt as the nicest type of debt, because the bank operates according to the law and the commitment. I don't need to analyze how terrible it is when it comes to the case where the debt is in the form of a hotline or a heavy loan or a mortgage. These cases are calculated by day, not by month or year. And these people are very good in putting pressure on you so that your life is always in an extremely stressful state. So I'm very sorry to those who are listening to this podcast and are in such a debt situation. I don't mean to be too negative about your situation. The reason I analyze this part carefully is to show you the damage of a bad debt, so that you are determined to get out of this stage. And in the next part, I will share with you some ways to gradually get out of this debt stage as effectively as possible. Back to the stage number 3 that we are talking about. That is the period when we go on a monthly salary, which means we can feed ourselves. This is the stage of most young people right now, and in many cases, many people will stop at this stage and live like this for the rest of their lives. And it's not just in Vietnam. It's the same in Western countries, especially in the US. And this way of living will make our lives very unsafe. If something is uncertain, or there is an unexpected amount that needs to be divided, or worse, the source of income is lost. Specifically, the job is lost. Then everything will be very serious. That's why people in the US are very afraid of losing their jobs. Sometimes they do a job they don't like all their lives, but they don't dare to change it. It is the pressure to live in this way of life. In Vietnam, things may be a little easier because basically it is easier to find a job in Vietnam. If you are kicked out of this place, you go to another place to apply for a job. However, even so, the situation of living according to each monthly salary is very restrictive. It is very difficult for you to close the door. That's why I put these 3 pillars of debt, food, and even being able to feed myself into a stressful and uneasy period. But as I said earlier, There is a fact that according to statistics, there are a lot of people stuck in this number 3 all their lives. With those people, they live paycheck by paycheck all their lives. How much they can do, how much they use. Even how much they can do, they pay half of it, and the other half is used up. However, I hope that you are following this podcast and you have at least a certain awareness, then you will not let me stop at that step. And to do that right when it comes to the third pillar, we must immediately have a plan to prepare for the next steps to quickly move on to a new phase. I call it the phase of following and creating. In the next episode, I will go deep and share with you all the steps in phase 2. In particular, I will guide you on how to set up the most effective follow-up activities, as well as how to get out of the debt situation as soon as possible. With this number, I would like to end here. If you find the content I share in this number helpful to others, please share it with your friends. Thank you for watching, and see you next week.